Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today you're joining us as we navigate the fascinating and actually surprisingly debated world of fighter jet generations. You've probably heard these incredible machines classified this way, right? And while our sources show us there's no official governing body stamping a Gen 5 label on anything, it's still an incredibly useful framework. These generations really represent major shifts in how these aircraft are conceived, what they're capable of, their performance envelopes, and the core technologies they rely on.
That's right. And it's worth keeping in mind, as some literary authors and analysts we looked at point out, this neat stepped progression isn't a universally held view. Some argue that the evolution of aviation has been, well, more fluid.
Mhm.
But what's fascinating here, regardless of that debate, is how widely this generational concept is used to understand the story of fighter jet development. It gives us a handle on things.
Exactly. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, and you already have, is to take a deep dive with us into this generational classification. We're going to explore a commonly accepted breakdown that starts with the propeller era and then moves through 5 distinct generations of jet-powered fighters. Okay, let's unpack this, starting way back with those amazing propeller-driven aircraft.
Okay, so the term fighter, or casa, as it was sometimes called early on, really solidified during World War I. Initially, it basically described any aircraft with enough lift to actually carry a machine gun. A great early example is the Backer FB-5 from 1914.
But just carrying a gun wasn't enough, right? I mean, these things weren't exactly breaking the sound barrier back then. The real challenge early on had to be speed, I'd imagine.
Precisely. Designers quickly realized that to be an effective fighter, an aircraft needed to be fast enough to actually intercept its targets. Fortunately, they weren't starting completely from scratch. They looked at the designs of the small, fast aircraft developed for pre-war air races like the Gordon Bennett Cup and the Schneider Cup.
Ah, right, those races.
Yeah, these racing planes provided a crucial aerodynamic foundation for building faster combat aircraft. They were already pushing the envelope on speed.
And how did they even arm these early planes? It's not like they had pylons hanging off the wings back then.
No, not at all. Initially, there were some ingenious, if somewhat, well, clunky solutions. One was the pusher configuration, where the propeller was actually behind the pilot, like in the Airco DH-2.
Okay.
This gave the gunner a clear field of fire ahead. Another approach was the tractor configuration, with the propeller in front, where the pilot would aim to shoot outside the spinning arc of the propeller, like in the Newport 11.
Wow.
And of course, some aircraft had a second crew member dedicated to manning a machine gun in the back, often on a flexible mount.
That sounds incredibly difficult for the pilot trying to fly and fight at the same time. Less than ideal, you could say.
It really was. But a truly revolutionary development emerged around 1915, almost simultaneously in France and Germany: synchronization mechanisms. This seemingly simple invention was, well, revolutionary.
Okay. It shifted aerial combat from a clumsy sideshow to a focused, offensive capability for the pilot. These ingenious devices allowed a machine gun to fire forward directly through the spinning propeller without hitting the blades. Game changer. Absolute game changer.
Yeah.
So once they had effective forward-firing weapons, how did the tactics of air-to-air combat evolve? Must have changed rapidly.
It did. As pilots gained more and more combat experience, they naturally started developing more effective tactics and formations. The most successful aviators began to figure out innovative ways to maneuver and coordinate, to maximize their chances in a dogfight. This period was just a rapid learning curve in aerial warfare.
Now, moving into the interwar period, I know biplanes were still a common sight, but things started to transition towards a more modern look, didn't they?
Absolutely. While biplanes remained prominent into the mid-1930s, this era saw the increasing adoption of monoplanes. These designs featured cleaner aerodynamics with cantilevered wings supported internally without external bracing, and monocoque structures, a design where the aircraft's skin bears the primary load, allowing for a lighter and more streamlined fuselage. These changes led to significant performance improvements. Much slicker designs.
And what about how they armed these sleeker aircrafts? Did they stick with the synchronized guns in the fuselage? Or?
Well, armament began to shift more towards inside the wings, positioned outside the arc of the propeller. This allowed for the installation of more powerful and perhaps more reliable weapons. However, many designs still included some synchronized machine guns mounted in the fuselage. It was definitely a transitional phase in armament design, kind of a mix.
Engine power also seems to have gone through a pretty dramatic increase during this time. That must have been key.
It certainly did, a massive leap. The rotary engines popular in World War I were rapidly being replaced by more powerful stationary radial engines. Just to give you a sense of scale, a Fokker DVL from 1918 might have had around 180 horsepower.
Okay.
By 1935, a Curtiss P-36 Hawk was producing around 900 horsepower. That's a huge jump in power in less than 2 decades.
Wow, yeah. And those pre-war air races we talked about earlier, they continue to play a role in pushing the boundaries of aircraft design.
Absolutely. Air racing saw a resurgence, and this period saw the introduction of inline engines, which generally offered a better power-to-weight ratio and allowed for more aerodynamically efficient engine cowlings, smoother shapes. The aerodynamic innovations that came out of these racing designs directly influenced the development of the aircraft that would eventually see combat in World War II.
Speaking of World War II, it sounds like there were some really different philosophies about how air-to-air combat should be approached in the years leading up to it. Not everyone agreed.
That's a crucial point, yeah. 2 distinct schools of thought really emerged. Japan and Italy largely adhered to the idea that highly maneuverable, lightly armed single-seat fighters would remain the dominant force in air-to-air combat. Think aircraft like the Italian Machi MC-200 and the iconic Japanese Mitsubishi A6M-0.
The Zero, right? Famous for turning.
Exactly, highly agile. And the opposing view. Well, the UK, Germany, the Soviet Union, and the US placed a higher priority on achieving high speed and a rapid rate of climb. Their thinking was that the increased speeds of modern aircraft and the intense G-forces of aerial combat would make traditional close-quarters dogfighting less prevalent, maybe even impossible sometimes.
Interesting. So speed over turns.
Pretty much. Aircraft like the German Messerschmitt Bell 109, the British Supermarine Spitfire, the Soviet Yakovlev Yak-1, and the American Curtiss P-40 were all designed with high-level speed and climb performance as primary objectives. Maneuverability was still important, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the primary design driver like it was for the Zero.
And then the war started, and the power output of these engines just kept going up and up, didn't it?
Exponentially. Like we mentioned, a pre-war Curtiss P-36 Hawk had 900 horsepower. By the end of World War II, an American P-51H Mustang could generate a staggering 2,200 horsepower.
Wow.
This dramatic increase in power directly translated to significant gains in performance, higher speeds, better climb rates, and crucially, the ability to carry more weight, like more fuel or more guns.
Firepower also seems to have gotten a major upgrade during the war. I recall reading about the increasing importance of cannons, not just machine guns.
Absolutely. More potent weaponry became a critical priority. The 20-millimeter cannon, which had actually been introduced into fighter aircraft as early as the Spanish Civil War, became increasingly widespread during WWII.
Right.
These cannons offered a far greater destructive capability compared to the rifle-caliber machine guns that had been standard on earlier aircraft. Much more punch.
It's also fascinating to consider when radar started to become a factor in aerial combat. Feels like a modern thing, but it started back then.
Yes, the rapid advancements in radar technology, which was invented shortly before World War II, allowed for the integration of early, bulky radar systems into some fighter aircraft, particularly night fighters. While still in its initial stages, this marked a significant step toward all-weather combat capability and definitely gave a glimpse into the future of aerial warfare.
And then came the real paradigm shift. Jet propulsion. Everything changed.
Exactly. In 1944, the first operational turbojet-powered fighters emerged, the German Messerschmitt Me 262 and the British Gloster Meteor. These revolutionary designs unequivocally demonstrated the superiority of jet propulsion. They offered a clear and decisive performance advantage over any piston-engine aircraft of the time.
Must have been shocking to see them.
Oh, undoubtedly. This truly marked the end of the propeller era for fighter jets and ushered in what we now call the first generation of jet fighters.
So the Korean War really drove home the point that the age of piston-engine fighters was drawing to a close. It was all about jets from that point on, and the primary focus seemed to be on achieving that critical maximum speed advantage, right? Getting there first.
Precisely. The Korean War made it undeniably clear that the future of fighter aviation belonged to jet-powered aircraft. The emphasis firmly shifted to achieving a decisive edge in maximum speed. This era also saw the introduction of crucial safety and performance enhancements like ejection seats, a huge deal for pilot survival, and all-moving horizontal stabilizers, which significantly improved aircraft control, especially at high speeds approaching the sound barrier.
And we even had the first ever dogfight between jet fighters during that conflict, didn't we? That must have been historic.
We did. On November 8, 1950, during the Korean War, a U.S. F-80 Shooting Star, which was actually just a redesignated P-80, engaged and shot down two North Korean MiG-15s. However, the American pilots were apparently quite surprised by the swept-wing design and the sheer speed of the MiG-15.
Ah, the swept wing advantage.
Yeah. This encounter directly spurred the rapid development of the F-86 Sabre by the Americans, specifically designed to counter the impressive capabilities of the MiG. It was a real wake-up call.
And the U.S. Navy also jumped into the jet fight arena pretty quickly, too.
Absolutely. The U.S. Navy adopted the Grumman F-9F Pamber, which was notable as one of the first jet fighters to incorporate afterburners. This technology provided a significant boost in thrust for short periods, particularly crucial during takeoff from carriers and in combat situations. The MiG-17, a further refinement of the MiG-15, also saw service during this period, another capable early jet.
It sounds like radar technology was still in a relatively early and specialized stage during this first generation of jet fighters, though. Not standard kit yet.
That's correct. Radar in this early jet age was primarily utilized in specialized night fighters, like the Douglas F-3D Skynight. These aircraft were specifically designed to operate in low-light conditions and relied heavily on their onboard radar systems to locate and engage enemy aircraft in the dark. Still pretty bulky and complex for the time.
All right, so then we accelerate into the second generation of jet fighters. What were the defining characteristics of this era, breaking the sound barrier consistently?
Yes, the widespread integration of turbojet engines equipped with afterburners was a key defining characteristic. This technology finally allowed fighter aircraft to reliably break the sound barrier and sustain supersonic flight. Mach 1 wasn't just a brief dash anymore. This wasn't just about going faster, though. It opened up entirely new tactical possibilities.
That's a massive leap in capability. This fundamentally changes things. What other significant advancements marked this generation?
Well, this generation also saw the integration of more effective and, crucially, smaller airborne radars. These radars were now compact and powerful enough to be carried by the majority of fighter designs, not just specialized night fighters. This significantly enhanced their situational awareness and all-weather combat capabilities.
And missiles started showing up.
Yes, critically, the first air-to-air missiles arrived as a primary offensive weapon. Guns were no longer the sole means of attack. The move to afterburners and missiles wasn't just about going faster and shooting further. It represented a fundamental shift from close-quarters gunfights towards potentially beyond visual range engagements. This forever altered aerial tactics.
That must have completely reshaped how pilots trained and how they approached aerial combat. A whole new way of thinking.
It fundamentally did. This shift was a direct consequence of the lessons learned from the aerial battles of the Korean War, combined with continued rapid advancements in aerodynamics, engine technology, and the materials used to construct these aircraft, like titanium, starting to appear. Designers were actively experimenting with new aeronautical innovations to fully exploit the potential of these emerging technologies. Lots of wild designs in this era.
Okay, next up is the third generation. It sounds like the Cold War and its unique pressures, the threat of nuclear war, had a major influence on the development of fighters during this time.
It absolutely did. The looming prospect of a nuclear Third World War led to a significant degree of specialization in fighter aircraft design. We saw a divergence into two main categories: interceptors and fighter bombers.
Right.
Interceptors, such as the Ling-Temco Vought F-8 Crusader, the Convair F-102 Delta Dagger, and the Convair F-106 Delta Dart, were designed primarily to intercept and shoot down enemy strategic bombers, often at very high altitudes and speeds. Think B-52 killers.
And the fighter bombers had a different focus. More versatile.
Exactly. Fighter bombers, like the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief and the Soviet Sukhoi Su-7, were designed to be more versatile. They were capable of switching between air superiority missions, engaging enemy fighters one moment, and then maybe using rockets or bombs against ground targets the next. They were often built for high-speed, low-altitude penetration to deliver their ordnance under enemy radar.
So these dedicated interceptors weren't really optimized for dogfighting then. It was all about the missile shot.
That's a key point. For the interceptors of this era, close quarters combat or dogfighting was largely de-emphasized in their design philosophy. The prevailing theory at the time was that air-to-air missiles would completely replace guns, and aerial engagements would occur at beyond visual ranges, BVR.
Right. The missile age had arrived, or so they thought.
Exactly. So as a result, their design focused heavily on carrying a large load of these early, often unreliable missiles. And having powerful radar, high top speed, a high operational ceiling, and a rapid rate of climb, all geared towards intercepting those high-flying strategic bombers before they could reach their targets.
But I remember reading that the reality of air combat, especially later in places like Vietnam, didn't always align with that BVR theory.
You're absolutely right. Combat experience in the 1960s, particularly in the skies over Vietnam, revealed that missile engagements often, maybe even usually, devolved into close quarters dogfights after all. The missiles weren't perfect. Pilots needed to visually identify targets, lots of reasons. This led to a renewed emphasis on maneuverability in fighter design and also on traditional ground attack capabilities.
So what kind of design changes did that renewed focus on maneuverability bring about? How did they make planes turn better again?
Well, we started to see the incorporation of aerodynamic improvements aimed specifically at enhancing maneuverability. Things like the introduction of canards, those smaller, wing-like surfaces near the front of the aircraft,
Okay.
leading-edge slats that extend to increase lift at high angles of attack, allowing tighter turns, and blown flaps that use engine bleed air to improve lift at lower speeds for better handling. There was also significant experimentation with VSTOL, or vertical short takeoff and landing, technologies during this period. Think the Harrier jump jet, although it didn't become widely adopted in mainstream supersonic fighter designs at the time.
And what about guns? Did they make a comeback after being somewhat sidelined by that initial missile-centric approach?
They certainly did. The less than stellar performance of early air-to-air missiles in the challenging combat environment of Vietnam really highlighted the continued importance of having an internal cannon as a backup or even primary weapon in a merge.
Makes sense.
This realization spurred the development of new electric motor-driven automatic cannons, like the Vulcan cannon. The electric motors improved the rate of fire dramatically and the overall reliability compared to earlier, often gas-operated designs. Guns were back.
All right, that brings us to the fourth generation of fighter jets. This is where we see some really iconic planes. What were the defining characteristics here?
The fourth generation definitely continued the trend towards multi-role capabilities, but with a really significant leap in the sophistication of avionics and weapon systems. The primary focus shifted somewhat from solely relying on achieving a high straight-line speed to designing aircraft that were capable of rapid and decisive transitions in speed, altitude, and direction. Energy maneuverability theory became huge.
Okay.
Think of iconic aircraft like the American F-15 Eagle and F-16 Fighting Falcon and their Soviet counterparts, the Sukhoi Su-27 and MiG-29. Agility became just as crucial, if not more so, than sheer top speed for air superiority.
So it's really about being able to maneuver effectively in a dynamic aerial dogfight, regaining that emphasis.
Exactly. And this generation saw the widespread adoption of key technological innovations that are still fundamental to modern fighter aircraft. Things like pulse Doppler fire control radar with look-down, shoot-down capability, a massive advancement that allowed fighters to detect and engage targets flying below them, overcoming the limitations of earlier radar systems that were often confused by ground clutter.
Huge difference.
Head-up displays, HUDs, projecting crucial flight information directly into the pilot's line of sight. Hands-on throttle and stick, HAS controls, allowing pilots to manage essential functions without moving their hands from the primary flight controls. And multifunction displays, MFDs, in the cockpit, replacing banks of analog gauges, all became pretty much standard equipment.
What about the physical construction of these aircraft? Were there any notable changes in materials or design techniques moving into the fourth gen?
Yes, we started seeing an increasing incorporation of advanced composite materials, such as aluminum honeycomb structures and carbon fiber reinforced polymer laminates. These materials offered significant advantages, including reduced weight, increased strength, and improved resistance to fatigue and corrosion, which helps with high-G maneuvering.
And did they still include internal cannons in these designs? Guns stayed standard?
Yes, absolutely. Unlike some of the earlier third-gen interceptor designs that had experimented with removing internal guns, cannons remained a standard feature in fourth-generation fighters. This reflected the hard-learned lesson about the importance of close-range combat capabilities.
Gotcha.
However, it's important to remember that while most fourth-generation air superiority fighters like the F-15 and Su-27 were designed with a strong emphasis on agility in dogfights, there were still exceptions. Aircraft like the large and powerful Soviet, then Russian Mikoyan MiG-31 interceptor and the European Panavia Tornado ADV interceptor variant still prioritize long-range interception roles over close-in maneuverability.
That leads us nicely to generation 4.5, or some refer to it 4 plus or 4 plus. What factors led to the emergence of this sort of intermediate generation? Was it budget cuts?
That was a big part of it, yes. The end of the Cold War brought about significant shifts in global geopolitics and, consequently, substantial defense budget cuts in many countries. Generation 4.5 aircraft emerged, in part, as a cost-effective way to further advance fourth-generation designs by incorporating more modern technologies without undertaking the immense expense of developing entirely new, clean-sheet fifth-gen platforms. They essentially represent significant upgrades and refinements of existing fourth-gen airframes or designs heavily based on them.
So what are the defining characteristics that set a 4.5 generation fighter apart from a standard 4th gen? What makes it point 5?
Okay, key characteristics generally include more advanced aerospace designs, perhaps incorporating things learned from early stealth research, fully modern digital avionics suites, often with sensor fusion and a degree of signature reduction, primarily in the radio frequency spectrum. Think reduced radar cross-section, but not full stealth like a fifth-gen plane.
Right, kind of low observable rather than very low observable.
Exactly. These aircraft also feature a high level of integration between their various systems and weapons, and they're typically designed from the outset for network-centric warfare. This allows these aircraft to act as nodes in a larger combat network, sharing targeting data and coordinating actions in real time much more effectively than earlier fourth-gen planes could. And multi-role capabilities remain a primary focus, perhaps even more so.
I've heard that some of these aircraft even incorporate some pretty cutting-edge engine technology and aerodynamic features too.
That's right. Some 4.5 generation designs adopted thrust vectoring for enhanced maneuverability, enabling them to perform incredibly tight turns and maintain control at very high angles of attack beyond what normal aerodynamic controls allow.
Like the Su-35 doing Cobras.
Precisely. Additionally, high-performance engines in some of these aircraft enabled supercruise, which is the ability to sustain supersonic flight for extended periods without using fuel-guzzling afterburners. We also saw a more widespread and extensive use of advanced carbon fiber composite materials in the construction of aircraft like the Eurofighter Typhoon, the Dassault Rafale, and the Saab JAS-39 Gripen NG, further improving their performance-to-weight ratio.
And finally, we arrive at the 5th generation of fighter jets. This is the absolute cutting edge of military aviation right now, isn't it? The stuff currently defining air power.
Absolutely. The introduction of the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor in the late 2000s truly marked the arrival of the 5th generation and currently represents the leading edge of operational military aircraft design, alongside others like the F-35 and, depending on definition, aircraft like the Su-57 and J-20.
What are the key features and design philosophies that define these 5th generation fighters? What makes them truly 5th gen?
Okay. 5th generation aircraft are fundamentally characterized by being designed from the ground up, right from the start, to operate seamlessly within a network-centric warfare environment, even more so than 4.5 gen. And crucially, they offer low multispectral signatures, what we commonly understand as stealth.
And that's more than just radar stealth, right?
Much more. It isn't just about being difficult to detect on radar. It encompasses minimizing their detectability across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, including infrared signatures from engines, visual detection, and even acoustic signatures. The complete integration of all these advanced elements, stealth, sensor fusion, networking, advanced avionics, is aimed at providing 5th generation fighters with a critical first look, first shot, first kill advantage in aerial combat. See them before they see you.
They sound incredibly complex, almost like flying supercomputers.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the level of engineering and the associated costs involved must be astronomical.
You're not wrong. The development costs for such incredibly sophisticated aircraft are extremely high. This is a significant factor behind international collaborations like the F-35 program, where multiple partner nations pool resources and share the massive financial burden of development and production. It's almost too expensive for any single nation, even the U.S., to do alone anymore on that scale.
Now, there's been a fair amount of discussion and speculation online, and even in some defense circles, about a potential 6th generation of fighter aircraft. What's the current thinking on that? Is it even a defined thing yet?
You're right, there are ongoing discussions and a lot of interesting ideas circulating about what a potential sixth generation of fighter aircraft might look like. Concepts involve things like optional manning, hypersonic capabilities, directed energy weapons, advanced AI co-pilots, and some proposals even suggest they could be primarily unmanned combat aerial vehicles, or UCAVs, working alongside manned fighters.
So maybe not even a traditional fighter as we know it.
Potentially. However, as it currently stands, there isn't yet established, widely accepted literature or a clear consensus within the broader aerospace and defense community on a formal sixth-generation classification or its definitive characteristics. It's still very much in the conceptual phase, with programs like NGAD in the US and GCAPI in Europe exploring possibilities. Therefore, until and if these concepts solidify and become a clearly recognized category within fighter aviation history, we won't be extending our deep dive into that speculative topic today.
That makes perfect sense. Let's stick to what's established. So, wow, we've covered an incredible amount of ground today, haven't we? From those early fragile biplanes struggling to carry a single machine gun all the way to the incredibly advanced, stealthy networked fighters of today. It truly highlights the continuous and relentless pursuit of greater speed, superior maneuverability, and cutting-edge technology in aerial warfare.
It really does. And while the classification of fighter jets by generation is, as we discussed right at the outset, a subject of ongoing debate and refinement, not perfectly neat boxes, it undeniably provides us with a valuable framework. It helped us understanding evolution of design philosophies, the constant push for air superiority, and the remarkable advancements in aviation technology throughout the last century or so.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. Given the astonishing pace of innovation we're currently seeing in drone technology and artificial intelligence, how might the traditional role of a fighter pilot, that image of the lone ace, and these very generational classifications we've explored evolve in the decades to come? Even if a formal sixth generation of manned fighters doesn't materialize exactly in the way we currently envision it, things are definitely changing. It's certainly a fascinating area to keep an eye on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.